This episode is sponsored by No Foods. That's KNOWFODS.com. It is a disruptive bread company that is dairy-free, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, non-GMO, and low glycemic index. Literally, if you've been following me for a while, you know that I am a raving fan of No Foods and an investor because this company is literally transforming how we eat through the power of breads. They have everything nowadays: breads, muffins, donuts, wraps, croutons, pancake mix, bread mix, pasta, and so much more. And it's healthy and it tastes amazing. So if you go over to No Foods and you use the code EOK, that is EOK, my initials, I've arranged for you to get a free bag of waffles, which are my favorite, which are Jesse Itzler's favorite, Rick Steele's favorite, and everybody I introduce this to, it's their favorite because the waffles are amazing. One thing I would suggest too is pick up the syrup. The syrup's phenomenal, extremely healthy, and my wife loves the donuts. So if you're going to go that route, go ahead, check them out, get the waffles, the donuts, and send me a note. Let me know what you think. We always love the feedback, and my goal is to get it in the hands of everybody imaginable. And one last note on this, because I am very, very passionate about it. If you know anyone who has type 1 or type 2 diabetes or is struggling with real blood sugar issues, please introduce them, or gluten-free or any of these allergies, please introduce them to this company. The CEO gets emails daily from people, especially kids with type 1 diabetes, who are not allowed to have anything that could totally spike their blood sugar and really screw them up, of how this food is just is a lifesaver for them. So please share it with people who could really, really benefit. And if you're someone who's health conscious like myself, I know you're going to love it. And it's just starting. Everyone's gonna know about it in the next few years. So No Foods. That's KNOWFODS.com. And let's get to the show. Hey everybody, it's Ed O'Keefe, and welcome to a new episode of the Ed O'Keefe Show. I am very excited to introduce to you a good friend of mine, someone I've looked up to for a very long time, Tim Larkin. Just came out with a book called When Violence is the Answer. Now, Tim is a guy who started a program called Target Focus Training, which literally is designed to teach people how to use violence as a form of self-defense. And I've been following him for many years. As you know, I'm a hobbyist martial artist and big fan of the arts. But Tim's system is a very direct system, can be learned very, very rapidly, and is very, very practical in the toughest situations. Little background on Tim is he was a former military intelligence officer. Larkin was part of a beta group that redesigned how special operations personnel trained for close combat. He has a 25-year career where he's trained in 52 countries how to deal with imminent violence. Over 10,000 clients are trained in target-focused training from military special operations units, special law enforcement teams, celebrities, and high-profile leaders, really learning how to use physics and physiology to injure the human body when humans are trying to attack them. The last thing I want to say about Tim real quick is that we go over a couple different stories in this interview that I know you're going to love. One is of a young girl who was in a very, very bad situation who used his system, and I'll let him tell the story because I think you're going to like it a lot. It's very applicable and practical, especially when you're a guy like me who has 7 kids. 5 of those are girls, and I have a wife, so it's very, very important to me. And the second thing that I think might surprise you is how much of this is about a different paradox and a different thought process towards it. So I know you're going to love it. Please go out and get his book, When Violence is the Answer. It just came out, and it's available on Amazon. And let me know what you think. Leave a review on Amazon, or not Amazon, on iTunes if you could. And reach out to us if you have any questions. So enjoy the episode. Good. It's a little bit colder here in Chicago than I'm assuming. Are you in Las Vegas right now?
Yeah, I'm in Vegas now. I was just in Chicago last week, and yeah, you guys are a lot colder.
A lot colder. Yeah, you were out here for Strategic Coach, was it?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, hey man, let's dive in. Something you probably don't know is I've gone through your system, Target Focus Training, probably 3 or 4 years ago. I bought your DVDs, and I know it's probably completely different. Virtually trying to go through something like that versus going to one of your live trainings, which is on my to-do list and goal list. And I a lot of the things I've learned about self-defense or self-protection or how to kill people in 3 seconds or less has come from studying your principles and everything like that. So if you don't mind sharing with everybody just a little bit more about who you are and what your background is and kind of like what you do.
Lifelong, I've been, since I was a Navy brat and growing up, and we lived all over the country. And my grandfather was probably a big influence on me early on. And he was a boxer in Boston, and taught us at an early age how to box. And he said something to us, because my grandfather was also not only a boxer, but he's a street fighter. Grew up during the Depression, and was a jazz musician and had to work for a lot of shady, gangsters, basically. That's really the only people that had money back then, and they were the ones that were paying for the bands to come in. And so my grandfather, had to fight a lot, and he would teach us. He loved boxing. He loved the fact that, the rules, and he'd take me to boxing matches in Boston all the time. But when he was teaching us, here we are, a bunch of, all my cousins, typical Irish family, a bunch of kids down in the basement with my grandfather, teaching us how to fight. He would be in the basement teaching us, and he'd say, "Hey, boys, this is what you do in the ring." And then he'd always make a point of pointing out the window, one of those basement windows. And he'd always say to us, he goes, "But if anybody tries to grab you or attack you out there outside of the ring," he goes, "you don't do this." And that's when he'd show us, basic, what you'd call probably basic street fighting moves. And as little kids, I think my mom knew what was going on down there. I doubt that we'd be hanging out with Pop, down in the basement. But what was really interesting was, as a young kid, I didn't really understand what he was trying to tell me. And, that was kind of that was something that stuck with me throughout. And then I got into martial arts, and I had multiple black belts by the time I was in my, late teens. But I never really found kind of what my grandfather was talking about. It was something in the back of my head. And I saw highly trained individuals in combat sports and martial arts, and then I'd see, instances of a person like that out in the street up against just somebody that knew how to just do violence. And they didn't do too well, And so I kept trying to look for that type of an approach. I didn't find it until, as a Navy brat, I ended up in San Diego, Coronado, California, and the Navy housing that we were in literally was across the street from SEAL training. So I'm about 13 years old, and I'm, literally watching across the street, one Sunday night when it looks like World War III went off. And it was what I came to find out the beginning of Hell Week.
Really?
And once I found out there was a job out there that you got paid to dive, blow things up, shoot weapons, look really cool with, back then it was Varney glasses, and wear, modified grooming standards. The rest of the guys had all really tight haircuts, and these guys basically looked like surfers. And I just couldn't believe you got paid for stuff like that. So I got it in my head that early on, that's my dream job. That's what I wanted to do. And I pretty much stuck with it. I went, and there's a reason I'm telling this part of the story. I did everything I could to prepare for that. Literally started taking cold showers right away. I hung out with all the guys. I learned everything I could about training. I did every research there, and I did everything I could to prepare myself. In college, my dad said the only deal he made with me was, he said, well, listen, he goes, if you're gonna do this, and back then the SEALs were not a prestigious outfit in the Navy. It was still the Cold War. It was still, nuclear Navy, and the SEALs were basically the redheaded stepchildren of the Navy back then.
Wow, isn't that hard to imagine? No.
Yeah, well, you got to understand. Back then, it was all about the nuclear Navy. And,
wow.
It was seen. I was a scholarship student at USC, meaning I had a ROTC scholarship, and they did everything they could to talk me out of going into special warfare because they saw it as just a waste of.
Oh my gosh.
That only basically people that have no career aspirations would go into it. And back then, in the SEAL teams, you'd be lucky if you made lieutenant commander, which isn't a very high rank as an officer, just because there was no upward mobility in there. You went there because you loved the job.
Right.
Now, of course, everything's changed, and I was there during that change. But so I'm fighting that, and I'm still real single-minded towards it. I did everything I could to get preparation and do all that. So 2000 for my graduation year, there were 2 slots available in SEAL training for officers. 2,700 guys applied. Of the 2,700, 275 of them made the cut.
Wow.
For two. Yep. Meaning we all looked. Basically, what that means is we all look the same on paper. And so, I realized I had a real problem because I didn't want to leave it to that. And so what I did was, and this is something about my life, I said, okay, I want to do everything I can to make sure that I get the best chance to get one of these slots. So I had a buddy that was going to school in Washington D.C. and I flew in at my own expense, stayed at his place, and I parked myself outside the Pentagon, the Navy building, where the detailer, the guy that actually makes the decisions, he was a commander in the SEAL teams, and he literally made the decisions on who got the slots. And he made me sit outside his office for 3 days, basically, And
wow.
He wouldn't talk to me literally 8 hours a day. I would sit there, and then I'd leave at the end when everybody left, and, he'd come in and out and not even acknowledge me. I had been talking to the receptionist. So anyways, the third day, he finally pulls me in around 4 o'clock, and he basically says, hey, midshipman, why should I talk to you? What are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here. And I basically just said, I had 2 minutes. I said, sir, I know you got a really tough choice. I said, you got a lot of people to look at. We all look the same. I just want you to know I will not quit. And I know that's your biggest concern is that you're going to send somebody there that's going to quit. And I said, I just want to let you know I won't quit. And he goes, okay, midshipman, I heard you. Now you can leave. And so I thought, oh, man, I blew it. That's it. I'm done. I'm walking out of the office. I start walking down the hall, and it's one of those big government halls, And I'm just bummed. I think I really screwed up. And one of the young officers that was in there, waiting for an assignment, came running down the hallway. And he just looked at me and goes, I can't let you leave, man. He said, I just got to let you know. Because everybody in the office was so impressed. He said, he goes, just to let you know, he goes, you had it after the second day.
Wow. Isn't that great?
And it was the whole thing. So, okay, so I'm telling that. So I get into training. I kill it in training. I'm bigger, faster, and stronger than everybody. I have all this knowledge because I literally got to talk to the SEALs. I had friends that were in the SEAL teams. They told me how to go through training. They told me where to hide food. My boat team won Hell Week, which is the 5-day event, because I knew exactly how to strategize it. I was killing it, and I was letting everybody know I was killing it. I was the guy that was slated to be anchorman in my class. I also had qualified to get my first choice of assignment out of class, and I was going to the best SEAL team back then, which was getting the most action, which was SEAL Team 4. They were doing a lot of counter-narcotics work. If you're watching Narcos, they were kind of involved in a lot of that was down there.
Really?
Yeah, they were doing training down there. So South America was really a big deal back then. So I was high as you could be as a young guy. I'm 21 years old, just got the world by the tail. And that's when everything changed in my life. I had a slight cold a couple of weeks outside of training, we had a dive that was really a no big deal dive. And without going into the details, basically what happened was while diving, I blew one of my eardrums and went into what they call vertigo, meaning you lose all sense of balance. And I was very lucky that I didn't have a more serious problem. I was able to get myself to the surface by grabbing onto one of the anchor lines of one of the boats, and I pulled myself up, and I was uncontrollably. I said when my head hit the surface, my head was slapping against the surface uncontrollably. They pulled me because you just have no sense. I'm bleeding out my ear, the whole deal, and literally, 7 years worth of preparation went right out the window with something. It was the first time I had an injury to my body that I could not control. I could not gut it out. I could not, tough it out. It was a true injury to the human body, and it ended my career before it even started in the SEAL teams.
Wow.
And so it was a seminal time. And the reason I'm telling everybody this is because, of course, when you think of self-defense, you think of bigger, faster, stronger. You think of, you think oftentimes that you have to be an elite athlete. Most people won't do self-protection training, self-defense training, because they look at things like the UFC and they look at areas and they see these huge, just elite athletes, and they just tell themselves, well, I could never do that. And therefore, there's no reason for me to look at, learning how to use my brain and my body to protect myself. And what I learned back then, I didn't realize, I thought it was the end of my life, but actually it was a changing, it was a seminal point in my life to where I learned about injury to the human body. And the switch that I started to make back then was understanding that people have always looked at the human body in a different way. Like, we will immediately notice differences in somebody. We will notice if somebody's bigger than us. We'll notice if somebody's faster, more aggressive than us. We'll notice all of the differences in them, and we focus on those differences, and that's what we think we're at a weakness. And what I quickly learned was we need to flip that switch, and we need to start looking at the similarities of the human body. And we all have similar weaknesses, inherent weaknesses in the human body. There are areas in the human body that can't take trauma of any sort. I learned it the hard way with my ears. That's just one area of the human body that anybody can affect. No matter how big, fast, or strong somebody is, if you burst the eardrum and go up to the semicircular canals and affect the injury that I had, and it's a very simple injury to do somebody, the person will lose more than 50% of their ability to balance themselves at that point. And these are very simple things. The reason I'm setting this up is because here I was literally the elite guy. I was invulnerable, and I went from that to basically a pariah, because once you get injured, everybody treats you like you have Ebola or something, because nobody wants to be around you, because it's just when you're in a competitive atmosphere like SEAL training and then the SEAL teams, nobody wants to be around something that they think is weak. And so it was really, really tough for me to make that transition. They kept me in the community, and I went into intelligence training. And I became an intelligence officer for special warfare. So I got to work with all the different special operations groups at a time where, the special operations community was expanding. And all of a sudden, we had a horrible, we had two bad things. We had Grenada and we had Panama happen. Grenada was right before I became an officer, and Panama was while I was an officer. And we had complete failures of communication during those times that were corrected, and the communities all started working together to what you see today, where all of a sudden, once the Soviet threat went down and the world opened up to what it is today, special operations just became the premier place to be for the military. And what was interesting was, when I was there, the SEAL teams were, Berlin Wall was coming down when I was at this one command. It was the command. It was Naval Special Warfare Command, which, the admiral, I worked directly for the admiral that looked at all SEAL teams. And the guys realized that, hey, we have to start thinking about putting hands on people again, doing hand-to-hand combat, something they hadn't looked at since the Vietnam era.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I was there at the inception of that, and they invited me because I had a martial arts background. I was a young guy, and basically I was fun to knock around for the older guys. And I had these guys were the legends of the SEAL team, and I had zero combat experience. I didn't even make it through training. I'm an intel geek, but they liked me. They liked the way I presented my information. I did a lot of good work in what I did, and so they wanted me part of this group. And they looked at everything. They looked at every martial arts that was out there. But the needs that they were looking for was they wanted something that worked, with somebody who the definition they were putting in is the guy had to be in country. We're training an operator that's been in country about 60 days. He's mildly dehydrated to, mid-range dehydrated, not eating well, sleep disorders, because sleep's all over the place. So any physical vitality that he had coming in pretty much was zapped at that time. And so they wanted to make sure that whatever was taught was
doable.
Works.
Yeah,
doable. And also had to work with tools. It had to work with any of the weapons that they were carrying synergistically.
So it had to be it had to cross over. So it wasn't two different systems, correct?
Yeah, and so basically what happened was, and for your listeners, the big benefit was this: because of this research that we did, basically we found an instructor who was an ex-Vietnam guy who had a very basic approach to what now has become TFT, but it was based off of these inherent weaknesses in the human body and the fact that basically relying on the one thing that we all are carrying around, which is our body weight. We all have body weight. And body weight, the world doesn't care if that weight is, 180 pounds of muscle or 180 pounds of fat. It's still 180 pounds. And if you know how to wield that, if you know how to use that, you can do devastating damage to anybody. Nobody wants, nobody wants like 25 pounds dropping in the wrong area of their body. And so that's basically the inception. That was where we started to put together this idea. And where we looked and where we got all our data was from sports injury. And the reason we looked at sports injury is because those are forces that you and I can replicate.
Wow.
They're humans colliding with humans colliding with the planet. And these injuries show up time and time again. And there are some that we all know about. Like everybody knows eyes, throat, and groin, but then you start looking at some of the lesser known areas, like attacking the ear or, striking the side of the neck. There's just areas, there's approximately 73 areas of the human body. Some of them are bilateral targets, so there's two. So you're looking at right around 120 areas that get a result. And the result that we're looking for is we don't care about whether or not the person feels pain. But what we want to do is we want to destroy, when your life is on the line, you want to be able to destroy a sensory system of the human body or break a structure of the human body so it no longer works while that person's with you. And that's kind of the goal of what we're doing. Where it comes into the normal people that I train day in and day out, the education goes two ways. My tagline is violence is rarely the answer, but when it is, it's the only answer. And I teach both sides of that because a lot of us make the mistake of getting involved in what I term social aggression, which is eminently avoidable. But very few of us have any training when it comes to asocial violence. And asocial violence is best defined as you're devoid of choice. Meaning violence is imminent. You're about to face grievous bodily harm, and you have no choice. You have no exit. It's going to happen, and you need to be able to take action at that point. And those are those rare black swan events that we all worry about. And that's really what I specialize in. I specialize in basically teaching people about the tool of violence, teaching people about how to avoid the avoidable. But the other side of that is, which differentiates me. A lot of people like to teach de-escalation, but they don't teach people what to do when you're devoid of choice.
Yeah. So Tim, just so my listeners get this, because I think where you're especially in your videos, and I'm sure live, where this starts really getting crystal clear is, the social is two guys at a bar they like opposite, they get a disagreement, whatever, they both puff up, blah, blah, blah. Someone can de-escalate that circumstance. But what you were showing in a lot of the videos and the trainings are like, there's people in this world that are asocial. They don't have the capacity to mentally or give a shit whether or not you care or not. They're just going to resort to violence, and they go from 0 to 60 without a blink, and they don't care. Right? Am I getting that correctly?
That's absolutely true. Yeah, and that's the hard part. What you're talking about, the puffing up, like if you've ever heard anybody brag about, using violence, if they bragged about a bar fight, or they bragged about some time when they, quote unquote, kicked some guy's ass or something, there's usually the heroic story behind it, There's usually, this guy said this to me and blah, blah, and it was a completely social situation where both sides chose to respond with violence. And those are things, it drives me crazy in my business, when I see other trainers, and they'll do things, that in our world, they call it scenario-based training, which to me has very little value, especially to civilians, but that's a whole other subject. But what they'll do is they'll set up a situation, and the situation itself will be wrong. I'm sitting at the bar, and some guy comes up and gets aggressive with me, basically, and they teach you how to, punch, kick, and that's a fast track into the back of a police car, and that's the luckiest situation that you have right there, because there's a good chance that it could even be worse. You could end up doing real damage to somebody where it's not justified, or vice versa. It could happen. You could end up for what over somebody knocked into me at a bar and I spilled a drink. That's. People what I've learned in all these years is the uninitiated, a lot of my clients, until, I kind of take them through this, a lot of people want to respond to social situations that are eminently avoidable with violence. And they want to respond to an asocial situation where violence is imminent, and they want to use their social skills then, and what I mean by that, they're quick to, if they think they can get away with it, puff their chest up and run somebody off their territory at a bar or something like that, or this guy was rude to my wife, and so I got right in his face, and they were able to chase him off. They're quick to use violence or the threat of violence for that. But middle of the night, their door gets kicked in. They got 3 guys with ski masks on. One guy has duct tape, and the other 2 have shotguns. And now you want to talk. Hey, who are you? Why are you here?
Right.
And that's, that to me is the education process. One of those situations, you can definitely use your social skills to get out of. The other one, you're going to have to understand how to use the tool of violence. And that's really my whole approach to this. I can teach anybody to effectively use their human machine, their brain and body, no matter what they have, no matter what limitations, as long as they can think and move. I've trained people with all sorts of physical disabilities and limitations. That's not the challenge. The challenge is to create the right mindset. The idea of when and where to use it, and to get your head wrapped around, when would you ever do this to somebody? When would it ever be justified to use this type of deliberate injury on another human being? And that's the challenge. The challenge is violence. The study of violence has been so stigmatized the last 50 years that the people that you and I need that information. It's really a basic human right to have your ability to protect yourself. And we've been told that it's that there's no value in understanding how violence works, and so the only people that are able to harness the tool of violence are the predators.
Right.
And so it's been my goal, and that's why I appreciate opportunities like this, to reach out to people and say, it's okay to look at this. Looking at violence and how it works does not make you a criminal, does not make you violent, any more than, learning how to drive a car doesn't mean you're going to do what some of these terrorists have been doing in all the various cities where they've been ramming cars into people or anything like that. There's lots of good reasons why you're going to want to learn how to do this. I put the analogy out to like swimming. Most of us learn to swim, or our parents had us learn to swim, or we have our children learn to swim, not to become the next Michael Phelps. It's to avoid drowning.
Totally. Totally.
And it's a basic life skill that everybody should have. And unfortunately, because of well-meaning people in our society, and the fact that actually, if you live in the United States, we've been so successful using the tool of violence that we have the luxury of, kidding ourselves that we no longer need to study this. And, that's been my challenge in getting that message out.
So let's go a little deeper on the asocial side. So one of the cool things, I think I was on, I interviewed Chris Voss, the FBI negotiator, who we were at dinner with, and I told him what I'm going to tell you now. I was, hopefully the lady I was sitting next to doesn't ever listen to my podcast, but Brian Kurtz, I had Brian Kurtz on my right, and then I had this really nice lady on my left. I really didn't have, I was trying to talk to her about stuff, but we weren't connecting on any of the same interest levels, and it might just be because I could sort of overhear you and Chris at the other, like 2 seats down, and all I could keep thinking to myself was like, I just want to lift up my chair and sit in between what Tim and Chris are talking about right now. But the asocial side, something you had said about like your unique skill set. So when I wrote the book Time Collapsing, a large part of time collapsing is modeling and accelerated learning by picking the right models. And something you had said at the table that really grabbed my attention was that you had mentioned, because the question goes, well, how does a social guy learn what asocial behavior and mindset is like, right? So how did you dive into learning and modeling these asocial violent people?
Yeah, there's the challenge in doing this is, the problem is, the best information when it comes to protecting yourself comes from the worst parts of society. So it's difficult. So when I look, the really the most crystal clear info that I get is the more I study, prison gangs and how they utilize violence. Is really useful to us, not to glorify them and not to condone what they do. But the reason you want to look there, you always want to look at people that can't afford to get it wrong, whatever the subject matter is.
Right.
And these guys can't afford to get it wrong. They derive everything that they get, any power, wealth, control, it all derives from the successful use of the tool of violence, and they're very specific about it. And what's really funny is, we tend to think, looking at prison and prisoners, we tend to think, the majority of them are just chaotic, randomly violent. That it's just a bunch of just no thought process. And just a horrible place to live where predators just run free. And it's actually the opposite in a lot of ways. All that exists, but it's the most hyper-rational group really I've ever studied. And
Is that right? Is that right?
Wow. Because violence is your currency, your overall currency, meaning the failure to perform in any way, shape, function will be met with violence. And will be severely met with violence. And if you operate in that environment, you're very careful how you operate, because you don't want that brought upon yourself. And, there's no randomness in violence. Everything is sanctioned in the prisons. Now, when they look at things, when they look at stuff, if they are, say, the Aryan Brotherhood, and they've been tasked with an assassination. They've been paid to assassinate somebody that's in prison, possibly somebody's going to testify, somebody that, ratted somebody else out. But they've been, they've accepted the contract. They can't afford to get it wrong. And sometimes it takes up to 6 months to set up a hit in prison.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah. It could be, depending on the guy's protection and everything like that. So what was really interesting is they look at everything from a very functional anatomical sense. I mean, they study anatomy. They look where to go. And the reason they study anatomy is because they want to learn how to be more efficient and effective in killing. And I could tell very graphic stories about how they've done this, and not graphic in the manner. What I found is real violence. When you talk about it, they talk about it dispassionately, and they talk about it the way you and I would talk about maybe a marketing campaign or something. It is their currency, and if you understand that, a lot of things make sense.
Tim, take us to an example,
okay,
like a story or something that is gives us our listeners a kind of a glimpse.
So Mexican mafia shot caller. That means he's one of the big guys in the Mexican mafia. Was making some bad deals. He's making some. I think it was a combination of not delivering on some promises to the marketplace. And then I believe probably selling some bad drugs. He was just getting to the point to where he was getting out of control. And this is very interesting because you want to think like the Mexican mob, they won't work with the Aryan Brotherhood, they won't work with the Black Guerrilla family because, it's a racial thing. And what you find out is, no, it all comes down to business, meaning, if they have an issue with one of those other gangs, that's fine. But it's usually a business issue, not a racial issue. And that if somebody doesn't live up to something, meaning you do a deal with another prison gang, and you find out that you welch on that deal, you as a group have to take care of that right away, or you're going to have a major problem. And so they have to police from within. And so it got to the point to where the Mexican mob said, okay, we got to take this guy out. And so the higher guys said, we're going to take this guy out. Well, what they did was they realized, okay, he's a pretty high-ranking guy. He's in this one prison. We need to set this up. He likes to play basketball, so we're going to start playing. So a bunch of guys from the Mexican mob, came in, and they were the same guys he knew, but they started playing basketball with him on a regular day. The only thing they changed was they realized they had snipers up there that were, if they think, the snipers are, just to let everybody know, if it's a fist fight, snipers won't shoot to kill. If there's any weapons, if they see any weapons, they're cleared to shoot to kill. And so it's very specific, and they know that. So what they needed to do was they needed to condition the guy they were going to go after, and they needed to condition the snipers and the guards to get used to seeing them have contact with this guy. So what they did was they kept feeding him the ball during the game and letting him make shots. And every time he scored, they'd come up and they'd clap him on the back, clap him on the stomach, clap him on the neck. Hey dude. And at first he was a little resistant to it. After 2 or 3 days of it, it just got to be the norm. The guards got to see it as the norm.
Yeah.
On the 4th day, the guy, the assassin that they hired, was there, and he came in, and instead of cuffing him on the neck as a congratulatory thing, that's when the shank went in.
Wow.
Shank went in. He was the one guy that came in. Boom, boom, boom. He was down. The guy was down, and they waited. They were very specific. He was stabbed 4 times, all in highly vascular areas, side of the neck, the liver, and the kidney, where he was at. But they waited until it was midway through the game because they wanted his heart pumping as fast as possible. So 2 things. They did things slowly and deliberately all week. They were touching. If you look back on the video coverage, they're touching all the areas, all the highly vulnerable areas of the human body, that if you're going to stab somebody, this is where you're going to want to stab them so they rapidly bleed out. And they knew that they needed to do it in such a manner that it deconditioned everybody watching as well as the target from being touched and not seeing his assault. The snipers never saw a weapon, they never saw anything, and the guy was dead before anybody could get to him.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's
and
crazy.
So what I'm trying to tell everybody is that was methodically thought out.
Yep.
They used slow, deliberate training first. And, that's the other thing that
I just wrote that down, Tim, before you even said that. I was going to ask you about the slow, because in your videos you talk a lot about slow, deliberate training, even in everything you do prior to moving up the speed.
Well, and the way I preface that is this, okay? If anybody in your audience has learned how to shoot a firearm, I'm wondering if this scenario makes sense to anybody.
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
And even if you haven't shot, let me take you through this scenario. You're going to learn to shoot a firearm, and so the first day, we spend about 30 minutes giving you the safety brief. How to correctly hold the weapon, how to load the weapon, how to unload the weapon, how to safe the weapon, all of that. And once the instructor is confident that you know how to do that, we're now going to take you to the range. But instead of taking you to the range, I'm going to actually take you to a shoot house. This is a house where, it's set up. It's a ballistic house where you can have force on force. You can have guys shooting back at you, and you're shooting at them. And now you've had your safety brief. I got you at the foot of the door. I tell you good luck, and I push you through the door, and people just start shooting at you, and you're shooting back. How accurate do you think you'd be?
It'd be awful.
Okay. So what do they do? What does good firearms training do? Well, they start doing dry firing. Slow, deliberate dry fire. They look at your trigger, pull, and make sure that you're squeezing, not slamming the trigger. Once you're there, they start having you shoot one round at a time. They're good instructors. They want to make sure that you're getting shot placement that's in there. They're locking in really good stuff. Now, once you have constant groupings, they'll put up some variations. They'll maybe start moving the target a little bit, having the target move, or have you shoot more than one target. And then once you can do that and keep good tight groups, then they're going to let you start to dynamically move and go. And then the last thing they're going to do is you'll end up learning, if it's combat shooting that you're going to learn, they'll put you through some sort of a test where you're timed and you go through. But they front load everything with deliberate, slow training. And they crawl in the special operations community, they call it crawl, walk, run. And the default is always to go back to crawl if there's any problems along the way. Meaning, I can't think of anything more high speed, crazy, and chaotic than a gunfight. And yet, the majority of time in training is spent slow, deliberate training first to lock it in, locking your targeting. And this is where the misnomer comes in. Now, typical self-defense, quote unquote, training or combat training jumps right from the safety brief into the shoot house, basically.
Yeah.
And it's this chaotic flailing where you don't get to learn anything. You basically learn to fear, unless you happen to be somebody that's genetically gifted and you actually happen to be pretty good at it. You get to beat up everybody else. But nobody really learns. What you need to do is you need to spend a lot of time first learning where to go, how to deliver that. Do the same thing that you do in firearms training. And the last thing you add to the mix is velocity. And, I've been training people for, upwards of 30 years now. I'm in my 20s, almost my 26 and a half year. And nobody's ever come back to me after surviving an event and telling me, you know what, Tim, I need to train faster. Every one of them will come back, and they've done fantastically. Amazing, in some of their situations. But they all came back and said, the first strike or two, I didn't get exactly what I wanted. And the reason I didn't get it is because I've been going too fast.
Too fast.
And they recognize that and they pull back. Now, the thing is, when people just hear briefly, oh, they train slow, everybody thinks weak right away. And they think, oh, great, they do it for safety. And safety is a byproduct initially of the training, but safety is not why we train slow. We train slow because I want to make sure that you can put that 1 square inch of you through that 1 square inch of them with all of your body weight through it. And what's so great is there's so much research out there on deliberate training and slow training. It's really in the mix right now. A book came out a couple of years ago called Talent Code by Daniel Coyle, and he talked about all these different disciplines, everything from classical music training to soccer training in Brazil to in Curacao, how they trained baseball, in Moscow, how they trained tennis. And each one of these centers that he looked at were producing the most amazing top competitors. And yet their facilities were kind of subpar a lot of times.
Is that right?
It was a deep practice methodology that was getting the results across the board. And, so there's a lot there. For some reason, when it comes to self-protection training, hand-to-hand combat, all that gets thrown out the window.
Well, I mean, Tim, I have, you have a couple boys, right?
Yes.
And I have 7 kids, and my daughter's 12, and my son's 11, and then it goes down the. But I'm coaching. I played in volleyball for whatever. I played in college and coached for like 20 years. But then I see my son, who boys only learn 0 to 60 when it comes to sports, and they're chaotic and sporadic. And I always see that as a good thing, because my belief system is if I could slow that guy down and get him under control, then he's got a trigger he can go. It's very hard to take somebody who doesn't want to go to be a little more carefree when they play sports. But what I was going to say was, it's in every sport, man. I mean, where people just want to let them go and do fast breaks, but they don't even know how to dribble. I mean, it's very chaotic. So, yeah, I'm going to pick up talent code for sure.
Young Code did great. And really all it is it's just the myelin. And the biggest thing people need to understand about that, if I want to just give them the quick hack, is your brain doesn't know the difference between fast and slow. It doesn't care about speed. It doesn't care about velocity. It's saying, what do you want me to do? Where do you want me to go? When this happens, how do you want me to place the body? And that's why it's worth going slow and deliberate and learning and saying, hey, we often say this, on the worst day of my life, when asocial violence enters my life, this is how I want it to go for me. And that's when you sit there and I take the time to make sure, okay, yeah, I've stepped through here. Here's 1 square inch. I'm telling my body, this is what I want you to do each and every time, and lock it in. And it's amazing. And what's funny is, in a very short amount of time, you start to see the differences. I mean, your accuracy goes through the roof. Your calmness, it already trains for the fact that we know violence is always going to be front-loaded with chaos. And so when it comes in, the fact that, the training that we do is called target-focused training, is I already know that your vision's going to go myopic. And so if all I'm teaching you to do is put 1 square inch on 1 square inch,
you can do that.
You're going to see some part of the body where there's that 1 square inch, and that'll be your starting point, and that's all you have to focus on. You just go from one injury to another. And the idea is, it's very simple. When you're facing asocial violence, that means somebody wants to do grievous bodily harm to you, and you are devoid of choice. If you do not take action, you will be facing your own murder. That's the impetus for what we're talking about. In that situation, you need to render somebody, they either need to be unconscious, incapacitated, or yes, dead. That's the only thing that's going to change the situation in your favor. And learning how to put injury to the human body, injury as we define it, is the most important thing. And you need to make sure that you learn that. I don't want you to learn in a chaotic environment. I want you to learn in a slow, calm environment. It's really funny. I go back to SEAL training. The first 6 weeks of SEAL training is just chaotic. They're physically beating the crap out of you, but they're not doing anything that really, quote unquote, can get you or anybody else hurt. Guys get hurt. They get hurt physically, but it's not something there. The second phase of training, when I was going through training, was weapons and demolition. These same instructors that were screaming, yelling, just going crazy on us, when it came to weapons and explosives training, these guys became calm, deliberate. They sat there and made sure we knew everything. They still would hammer us physically, after we were gone from the range and stuff. But during our actual instruction period, it was all put into us in calm, clear manners, and making sure that time and time again, we were able to go back and do that. When we were breaking down weapons, when we were putting them back together, we were preparing because, at the very end, what they did was they took 3 different weapons, they dumped all the parts into one box, shook the box up, dumped it upside down, and then you had to put all 3 weapons back together under time while they're asking you questions about each part of the weapon or the cyclical rate or all these things. That's what they were preparing you for. But they didn't prepare it for you. Day 1, they didn't dump a weapon and start screaming at you. Day 1 was breakdown, making sure everything worked, get it done, slowly, deliberately. And by the end, we were able to do that. The majority of us were able to pass that situation. But it was the slow, deliberate training that got us there.
Yeah, that's awesome. So a couple more questions, Tim, just to respect your time. I could probably ask you.
Ed, I gotta say, man, I hope I'm not going down. I hope I'm.
You're easy, man. This is easy. This is like the stuff that I'm actually sitting here thinking, like, I know you guys have trained, which I'm gonna ask about your trainings in a few minutes, but I'm like, my schedule's chaotic like yours is, where I'm like, maybe I got to figure out, get a group of my like 10 or 15 of my clients together and just hire your guys to come down or come up or whatever. I've done so many different types of martial arts as like a hobbyist, and I say I'm a hobbyist because I've seen, how pros train, and I definitely don't train at that level. Here's a question for you. When did you know, like, was there ever a moment where you were like, man, this shit really works?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in my misspent youth, when I originally learned this, I didn't learn that. I learned this from basically a functioning sociopath. The guy was, he's not a serial killer like Dexter, but he's kind of like that. Meaning the guy that learned this was a Vietnam vet. He really was, sociopathic. And but he was fine. He was not a brutal person or anything like that. But he literally enjoyed, the idea of this information. And he enjoyed teaching this information. And learning from him was really interesting. And he didn't encourage you to go out and use it, but he didn't mind you doing it. And a lot of what got popular early on with this approach, especially when we were training in the special operations community, was the fact there were guys using it and just using it on other people who were supposed to be the experts, who were supposed to be the hand-to-hand experts, and they were just a guy with very little training in comparison was able to take out a guy that had years and years of training, was a recognized subject matter expert. And it was because the approach was very direct to injury of the human body. And I just remember using it one time on a guy that came at me, and all I did was I just slammed my 4 fingers right into his throat. And this guy was way bigger than me, and I just saw the look on his face when all his air was gone. And then I slammed him a punch right in his solar plexus, which then seized up his lungs, and he just crumbled. And it was just, he literally wanted no more at that point. And, I was very lucky. I was lucky the guy didn't fall over, hit his head. It's so wrong. The situation that I did it in, I should have, I was a young 20-something.
Yeah, knowing better now, but yeah, it is what it is. Yeah, right, right.
I wasn't taught the premise of antisocial aggression and asocial violence back then. That's what TFT evolved into, and that was through my further study through this, and it has a lot of great people that helped me out with that along the way. Back then, our whole thing was the fact that anybody could do this to anybody, and that was the big selling point, was that you didn't have, in a SEAL platoon, say, you didn't have the 3 guys that were really good at, whatever the chosen martial art was, and then the other guys all sucked, and they were just basically the punching dummies. Once you learned injury to the human body, your quote-unquote weak link was just as effective as you. Because, again, it's not about size or physical strength. It's about who gets the first injury.
Right.
And that's a 50-50. So all of us have, basically, when you go into a potentially violent situation, you always start off at 50-50. Everybody has. That's the best you can have. And then the guy that gets the first injury. And then this is the whole thing that we're talking about, is developing intent. The intent that, hey, if I'm devoid of choice and I have to do something, I need to now have the intent to injure. And developing that in somebody through the slow, deliberate training at first, they realize, like, the focus, all of a sudden, the focus is not on them Like with a client, like I have people, the first thing they're always worried about, and I understand, is like, hey, I want to come to your training, but man, I'm worried I'm going to get hurt. And I have to flip that right away on somebody. Go, hey, listen, the whole focus of this is you doing it to the other guy, not you seeing how much, punishment you can take. I'm not here. I don't want to find out if somebody grabs me that's bigger, faster, and stronger than me and a better athlete than me. And there are plenty of guys out there that are amazing martial artists that if I had to play their game, they'd take me out right away. But I know, what I have in the back of my mind is if they make a mistake, grab me and give me a part of their body, I don't get to find out how good they are at what they do. Because once I affect the injury, his body goes into the response, and it's not a joy. And the way you can see this is look at something like the UFC.
Yep.
But look at it differently. Yep. Look at all the injuries that happen, okay? Because that's where violence begins. Where the competition ends. Whatever ends competition, goes fine. It's like people will say flippantly to me sometimes, "Oh, if your stuff's so good, why don't you see it? Why isn't it in the UFC?" And I said, "It is.
It is. It usually."
They go, "What do you mean?" They go, "Well, how did it do?" I go, "Never been beaten." I said, "Never won. It never won an event, but it's ended every event it's ever been used in." And they look at me like, "Well, they think I'm being a smartass." And then I start showing them the injuries.
Yeah.
And I go, that's what we're talking about. Here are two amazing athletes who train for 6 weeks, minimum. They're in top of their shape. They're going. They don't want to quit. Neither of them wants to quit. And then something happens. A collision happens to a part of the body that can't take the trauma. And all of a sudden, this guy is just his whole world. The ref has stopped the fight. Everything's there. People realize, oh my God, the ankle's broken, or the leg's broken, like when Anderson Silva broke his leg.
Yeah.
So people recognize injury right away.
Well, I remember like Matt Hughes was this one he was fighting. It was a championship match, and I don't know if he was fighting one of the Diaz brothers or something like that, where the guy stuck out his hand for like a soft jab and he poked Matt in the eye, and it was just like the thing was stopped for 5 minutes, and he was like, here's the toughest man in the world at that weight level at this time, who barely got touched by a pinky, who's literally like crying, and no disrespect to Matt because he's a beast, but that's an example.
But that's it, and that should give everybody the encouragement that I'm talking about. We're not talking about competing. Competition is, it's the difference between competition is like looking at a block of marble and and the best guys in the world can carve out, Michelangelo's David. And I tell people all the time, I said, no, I'm not going to I can't teach you how to do that. That's a completely different skill set. But I can. I go, how tough would it be to take a sledgehammer to Michelangelo's David and destroy it? That's really, anybody can do that. It's a real easy skill set. Destruction is a very simple skill set.
Yeah.
And it bypasses everything, and anybody can learn it. And there's lots of great people. Everybody from Jack Dempsey to all the guys that did the World War II tactics and everything. They all realize it's really easy to get any human being to be able to use the power of destruction. That's a God-given skill set that we all have. You just have to learn how to use it, and anybody can get a result doing it that way. I've had the most unlikely people, who have had, literally abductions, potential rapes, attacks, and they've been able to use injury against a much more accomplished person, somebody who's armed, somebody who's there, and they've been able to affect injury and put the person out in unconscious, in an unconscious state for the most part. I've had two civilian clients that ended up taking the life of, their attacker.
Really?
Wow. But it's all been unlikely people. It's all been people that you'd look at and you go, oh, God, I hope it never happens to them.
Wow.
Type thing.
Yeah, you make me want to ask more questions about that. Hey, so here's a question, a question I've asked recently, and this will be one of our last ones here, but like, when do you, like, this is something I've wrestled with as a father, right?
Yeah.
So in the morning, we turn on Good Morning America. It's kind of like in the background, whatever, as we're getting lunches, kids are open, and every 5 minutes I got to change the station because there's something on the news that just, quite frankly, I don't want my kids hearing or seeing.
Yep.
But it also, there's something that happened recently, and it happened to I don't know, like we're I'm in Chicago, right?
Right.
And so some of the stuff you were saying, like with the gang violence, right, and the rules inside prisons, a lot of the violence that's happening in Chicago is a byproduct of the destruction of boundaries. Like, so they got rid of a lot of the I want to say ghettos. I don't know if I'll get in trouble for saying that, but like they got rid of a lot of the housing. The big, like areas that in those areas, that was the defined territory. And then now all the school systems, so the gangs have gotten so spread out. And from what I understand, the younger gang members don't really respect the older ones. So it's like anyone's game, right? So in Chicago now, we're like a mile and a half away from where people are literally getting killed every weekend. It's happening all the time. And a question I've kind of, as my kids are getting a little bit older, I've really asked myself, when do you start teaching your kids that the world has really bad people?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean,
And let me ask one more thing too, Tim, as you're thinking about that. Like, I've become friends with so many Navy SEALs and Delta operators, and these are the nicest freaking guys you'll ever meet. Like, I mean, they really are.
Yeah.
They just have been trained and to go out and eradicate and make bad people who can't, like. And I think this is my little rant. I guess it's my podcast, so I can rant a little bit, right? The people who go on the news and complain about frickin' what we do in the worst parts of the world, they think those people are socially oriented, and they actually give a rat's ass what you believe, when those people really just want us normal white, black Americans, or any color Americans, to just fucking disappear because you have a different religion than they do, right?
Yeah.
So those are bad people, really evil people. So when do you start teaching your kids about this? And I guess what's the framework?
Well, my wife. I mean, if you met her, I'm never allowed to tell anybody that she's, she's now police captain with Metro. I always introduce her as a yoga instructor if people don't know her, and she's a world-class yoga instructor, and she does that. But I do have the benefit of having a wife that gets it. She's seen the worst parts of society, and she deals in some really, she's had a very, very, interesting career. But it hasn't put an edge on her at all. I mean, most people, if they just met her, would have no idea that she does what she does. And quite frankly, most people that just meet me, unless they know professionally what I do, I pretty much shy away from really going in depth. And the reason being is both our jobs are jobs that put people on their heels a lot of times. If I really start talking about it, you have to be prepared for it. With our kids, I wrote an article a while back because people were asking me another variation of the question. Hey, not only when should I start telling my kids, but when should I start training my kids? And my whole thing is, how does a lion cub do against a hyena? What if you had a highly trained,
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
lion club, and the reason is you don't. It's us. It's we are the parents. I mean, you see these disconcerting, studies that have been done where children have been trained. Hey, don't respond to a stranger. Don't go in, and then they'll do a controlled test where every kid will be asked to help a puppy or something, and they jump right in the car.
Zero question.
And they don't have the mental capacity to process what's going on. So I don't think that we're putting kids. I don't think by trying to initiate too early that it's necessarily going to do. I think it's much more that you try to control the environments as much as possible. And I know that's really hard. I have twin daughters that are 3 years old. I have a 6-year-old, and then my 21-year-old is, in college. And, I live it every day.
Yeah.
There are just some things that are out. And, my kids know we always talk about awareness, but, the reality is I will, look, I tell my little guy, hey, clean your room up, do this, yeah, dad, and then it's squirrel, and he's off doing something else, and he forgets something as basic as that, and then I'm supposed to try to tell him, hey, there are bad people out there. It's whether or not they can process this. Now, that's not saying that you don't make that aware. You need to start seeing. I would say where it's going to start sinking in is probably when they hit like 10, 11. That's where you're going to really start making some headway with them. And then it's not, just don't ever expect that that's going to be enough.
Yeah, exactly. And not, it's so funny. I remember just taking my daughter to like a Starbucks, and when we left Starbucks, there was just really two guys at the corner. Same. Okay, so I'll just flat out say it because this is what it is. So the guy who helped us inside Starbucks, African American guy, awesome dude. And then we went to the corner. We're getting ready to cross the street, and the two guys by us, African Americans, totally different environment. Like there's shit just was so different instantly, and it could have been white guys or whatever. So we were walking up the hill, and I said to my daughter, I go, hey, let's just walk through. What did you notice about the guy inside the store, and what did you notice about the two guys outside the store, and tell me how you felt. And she was totally able to walk me through exactly what I felt, but she didn't know how to verbalize it or how to she was able to verbalize it, but now, and I said to her, hey, Grace, so whenever you're feeling those feelings, you need to make sure you find an adult that is a good adult and not be in an environment where you're getting those feelings. I don't know. Am I wrong, Tim? I mean, this is just sensory awareness training.
What I tell my kids all the time, we started, Sasha and I started this early, is, when the kids, say something as which little kids do all the time, that's not fair, this isn't fair. We don't just flippantly say life isn't fair, but we literally do say that to them, and then we explain it.
Totally.
And so you don't have control over this, but you do have control. We teach them what they do have control over. How they look at something or how they do something. And I've been amazed how much that's actually really helped. They start to get it. They even repeat it to each other, like, "Oh, life's not fair," And these little kids. And I look back, and the one thing that I'm very aware of is, and I don't know if you can relate to this, but I had uncles, and I grew up in Boston, and so I think I forgot, it was an Adam Sandler show at one point where there was an Irish, like an Irish brother or something, and they were trying to teach kids how to swim, and every time the poor kid couldn't swim right, he'd throw a beer bottle at his head. that was kind of the adult environment that I had with a lot of my uncles and everybody. They weren't the most nurturing.
That's so funny.
But what's very funny is my cousins and I have talked about this. Little throwaway comments that those guys made to us, both negative and positive, had a huge effect early on. And so, don't ever discount that, even if they don't seem to absorb it right away. I'm very careful what I tell little kids, any limiting things,
Yeah, zero question.
I never say anything. And this is not like, from a self-protection standpoint, it's really good. Like I tell the girls all the time, hey, if they're up on something and I'm worried about them falling, I tell them, hey, could you just get down? You got great balance. As hard as it is for me not to say,
you don't want to fall on your head. Yep. Yeah,
I flip all those things, and then I always reinforce. I have the kids in gymnastics right now because I want between now and 7, I want to make sure they really get that internal center of gravity and balance down, because it's going to help them in everything else. But I always talk about them, how much hard work they put in, not whether they're just good or bad. It's those little things. And the same thing is, once you set that in, then when you start saying, hey, you have to be careful, not everybody's always nice. Some people are again, it starts to sink in. Anytime one of their playmates or something isn't acting or behaving nice, that's a great time for me to tell them, well, not everybody's nice.
Totally.
And putting that stuff in. But The real thing is, we as parents just have that hard job, and this, my wife and I are busy as heck, and still just have to realize that I have to put the time in because it's my responsibility at these ages. I can't expect these kids to, always make the right decisions. They're good kids and they're gonna want to help people, and that is a risk. It's a huge risk.
Yeah, and, I got to say is one thing, because, as a parenting thing, sorry to interrupt you there.
No problem.
I posted this article. It's Ray Allen, or is it Ray Allen? Yeah, Ray Allen who just retired from the Heat and then Boston, wrote this phenomenal article about a letter to his 13-year-old self.
Yeah.
About what people are going to say to you. They're going to call you a white boy. They're going to call you you didn't drink when you were in high school, so you're going to be an alcoholic here. You're never going to be any good, blah, blah, blah. And obviously his career was phenomenal. I printed that out, made my 11-year-old son read it last. I didn't make him. I just said, hey, Mike, I got this for you. And it's so funny how that article, he was just so enthralled in it. And then he's like, Dad, he's like, hey, can you come in my bedroom and just hang out with me? I'm like, it was the craziest thing ever. But I said to him, I go, what's the one thing you took away from that article? And he's like, never let what other people say to you stop what you think you can do. And I was like, wow, I'm going to start printing off articles every day from other people,
and okay, so that's a sideline. I'll leave. I know you probably, and I can go as long as you want, but it's just one thing I think is really important.
Yeah.
That's a really good example of something that I found really effective. You know how you've always heard the term, you can get whatever you want as long as you don't care who gets the credit? Okay, that's a great example, because that wasn't you coming to him. That was you sharing a third-party article. And that's what made the point. So you're seen as, I did this with my older son, like my 21-year-old, that I always got him coaches.
Totally.
And he knew the whole thing. I said, listen, I will help you. You have an interest in X, Y, or Z. I'm going to get you some help. I said, and all I care about is I want to hear that you're putting the work in. As soon as I hear that you're not putting the work in or you're difficult to deal with, that you're done.
Totally.
That's it. And so what I did was I found people to deliver the messages I wanted to deliver, but I didn't want to be the overbearing dad that this, and this. I wanted them to come to their own conclusions and accept the material. And I found that to be really, it's like people are really shocked that I don't force my kids to go through training or anything like that. I expose them to it. I truly feel that, I want them to have a basic understanding of the tool of violence and how it works, and I do that at the appropriate ages with them. But, I don't expect them to have the same interests as me, and I'm not going to force them to do things. I want them to be their own person, but I think probably one of the greatest gifts you can give kids is if you just stop trying to always think you have to deliver the message.
Totally.
Get strategic about it and find third parties like you did with that article and let them come to their own conclusions. It's amazing what you'll have. You'll have exactly that. I had the exact same effect where they then want to hang out with you more. They actually then want to talk about things and open it up because they don't feel that you're coming down from high above and telling them this is the way it is.
Yeah, totally, man. And the one last thing I'll say, I'm parenting, if you don't think strategically, as you just mentioned, and realize there are resources outside your two ears, and they will receive it. Who else is going to? Everyone else. That's just a parenting side note. I think it's one of the hardest jobs you'll ever have in your entire life, and it's also the most rewarding. But it's also a lot of work, and no one's going to put your kid ahead of their own priorities unless you find. So anyhow. I couldn't agree more on that, and amen to that, man. So hey, real quick, we have 2 minutes to wrap up. So I have a video interview here in minutes where I get to talk about time collapsing for an hour. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Well, hey man, I've loved this. Where can people find out more about you and your trainings and everything you got going on?
Probably the easiest is just my name, Tim Larkin at timlarkin.com. Larkin is my last name, but all one word, just timlarkin.com. If they sign up for, my free newsletter, it really is. It's just good content. I'm not somebody that tries to, that wants you to I mean, I'd love you to buy products of mine, but I really want you to understand what our approach is and our philosophy is, and make sure that it's congruent with what you need. And a great way to do that is to just get the newsletter and just get content. If you like some of what we talked about today, I have a lot more information like that available at the site.
Yeah, and just so everyone knows, we didn't even talk about weapons stuff that they do. I mean, his trainings are amazing. You can actually find some cool stuff on YouTube as well that they've done. They have some free videos up there. TargetFocusTraining.com, and we'll have links for everything. So Tim, man, I love talking to you, brother. I definitely am going to put on my note here to circle back with you about either coming out to a training or figuring out how to do something for my clients or something like that. You guys are, just doing amazing stuff. So I really appreciate it.
Hey, well, thanks so much. And yeah, if you're heading out to Vegas for any particular reason, let me know, and we can connect. There's some great guys I got out here. I'd love you to meet.
Yeah, what's funny is whenever that's good, man. So when people say, "Hey, are you going to Vegas?" My knee-jerk response now that I'm a little bit older is no.
I totally understand.
So now if it's going to train, I'll keep me off the strip, and we'll be good. I'll go train with you for a couple days, or any of your guys for a couple days, and that'll be fun. So
yeah, we just opened up a tactical training ranch right outside of Vegas, and I've got 2 Delta guys doing the shooting programs, and it's just a hell of a lot of fun.
Wouldn't it? Gosh, that sounds amazing. So, all right, brother, I got to jump. You're awesome, and I will circle back with you. I really, really appreciate it, Tim. This was a great interview.
Thanks a lot, Ed. Have a great one.
All right, bud.
Hey, it's Ed O'Keefe, and one more quick thing. If you are in business, or you're an entrepreneur, or you're an aspiring entrepreneur, specifically if you're online and you're looking to grow your business rapidly and escape the time for money trap, then I have a couple resources I want to share with you. One is my book, Time Collapsing, which you can pick up at timecollapsing.com. We give it away free if you pay shipping and handling. And that's my success philosophy from the last 17 years of being an entrepreneur, starting without any formal education and really grinding my way through it, learning the psychology, learning the success systems, learning marketing, and then really just kind of brute forcing my way to figuring things out with amazing mentors, amazing people, but how I did it. Pretty good process and laid out there. That's one thing. If you like to come to any events or want ongoing training, make sure you're checking out what we're doing over at timecollapsingacademy.com. We're always putting on events. So depending on what time of the year that you listen to this episode, you may find we have an inner circle, which is usually my virtual private clients coming up. If you want more personal attention, we have my Platinum Mastermind, and then I have a private client group as well. And then every so often we do random retreats at either my house or, but please check it out and stay connected. And then if you know anybody who might benefit, please share it with them as well. One last thing before I go is our goal is to influence and touch as many people as possible. So if you like what we're doing here, do me a quick favor and give us an honest review over at iTunes. It really helps with our rankings. I didn't know that. I can know it now. And I got to start asking people for reviews so that other people get exposed to what we're doing here at the Ed O'Keefe Show. And if you have any guests or anyone else you want me to bring on, just give me a holler. I'm completely open to interviewing anybody that's doing anything amazing, that's inspiring, and that can really benefit other people in our ecosystem in our world. So that's it. I appreciate you, and hope you enjoy this episode. And please share it with people you think it might also benefit. All right. Thanks so much. One more quick little announcement. If you're someone who tries to squelch inflammation in the body and is doing everything you possibly can, either through your diet, pharmaceuticals, or nutritional supplements to make sure you feel amazing, then you're going to love this. So my company, Marine Essentials, has partnered with Amazon. Well, maybe not really partnered, because Amazon allows anybody to partner with Amazon. But we've put all of our products, all of my health supplement products, on Amazon. And what's pretty cool about that is it allows me to give coupon codes to my listeners and subscribers to get awesome discounts for trying them out. So you can go on there, and the best part too is that since it's on Amazon and they have 1 billion buyers, we're already at a discounted price when you purchase through Amazon. If you use the code EOK50 off, that's the numbers 50OFF, EOK 50OFF, you can get whatever the existing price point is, and you can get it 50% more off. And usually you'll get a substantial discount. But let me tell you about two of the products that I love the most and why they are the best for squelching inflammation. Marine D3 is a product that literally we sell for $69 per bottle. We've sold over 700,000 of them in the last 7 years, I think it is. It's my unique custom formulation, designed with 3 phenomenal ingredients. CNL P, which is a algae extract from just off the shores of Korea. The fishermen found that the fish in a certain area were healthier and more plump in that area, and it led to researchers going down, figuring out what they were eating that made them so healthy and make them so healthy, and they found this extract, and it just has been shown to have the most powerful antioxidant effects in the body and last in your body much longer. So it protects you for 12 hours, whereas most land-based antioxidants really only stay in your body 30 minutes. We combine that with calamine oil. Calamine oil is a squid, which is a omega-3 that has the opposite DHA to EPA level, meaning higher levels of DHA and less levels of EPA, which fish oil is the opposite. Fish oil has a lot more EPA and a lot less DHA. Now, if that's too complicated for you, let me explain it this way. Your brain, your eyes, your heart are pretty much made up of the fat DHA, okay? And so this, by utilizing this omega-3, we're using the right body perfect omega-3 for you. And then what's amazing about that is we also combine it with vitamin D3. And so with Marine D3 alone, you get a phenomenal antioxidant, an extraordinary omega-3 combined with vitamin D3. And if you get it on Amazon, you get it at a crazy low price just using the code EOK50 off. The other product that I want to highlight on Amazon, because it really is really perfect for joint pain, is Omega Flex. And Omega Flex has calamine oil as well, so I've already talked to you about that. But we also have 2 other extraordinary antioxidants that are proven to, in clinical studies, human clinical studies, to inhibit some of the key enzymes that cause excess pain and inflammation in the joints. So go check those out today on Amazon. And just like I asked you before regarding reviews, we live and die by reviews. It's how we fight the big old companies that can just spend billions and lose money. So your honest feedback is very, very important to us. If you like what we're doing with Marine D3 Omega Flex, please leave a review, and we really appreciate it. It helps other people know whether or not they're buying from good people and a good product. So that's it. EOK 50 off, and it's on Amazon. And you could do that with all the other products that are listed under Marine Essentials as well. So that's it. This is Ed O'Keefe. Thanks so much, and have an amazing day.